Hi guys, welcome back to Waxing On. It's the 22nd of March 2021 and it's Monday, so that means we're looking at jazz. And today we're going to look at just a couple of albums by a fellow that started out as a trumpet player but really didn't make his mark until he got into arranging and then much later into producing. And I'm talking about Quincy Jones. Now, my first exposure to Quincy Jones was he was musical director on a Bill Cosby variety show. I think it was called The New Bill Cosby Show because just previous to that he had had a comedy that Quincy had written the soundtrack for. But that got canceled and CBS picked him up for a variety show that ran for a year. And Quincy was the musical director. Now, this was my first real exposure to understand who Quincy was and what he was doing, because every week when they introduced the band, they kind of featured him conducting. The band was featured a lot in the program. Quincy really got to get some face time on television with this one. So I went out and I was looking for some albums. First one I can't find right now was Walking in Space, produced by Creed Taylor. And Creed Taylor excellent at producing some great albums, some great crossover albums. But the first album I've got of Quincy Jones was this one, Smackwater Jack. And this was back, I'm going to say in the 70s again, before he got producing Michael Jackson with Thriller and all the big hits. He was still writing, arranging, and he put together an excellent band for his albums. To give you some idea of what's on here, we've got a broad range of music. He's doing Carole King's Smackwater Jack, obviously. We got Vince Guaraldi's Cast Your Fate to the Wind, and you maybe remember we mentioned Vince back at Christmas time when we were looking at the album Charlie Brown Christmas. He's the one that wrote the music for the Charlie Brown series. Theme from Ironside, so a television theme song in here. And Quincy not only did music for movies, but he did a lot of soundtracks for television as well. You may also remember Quincy when, I just think of it now, a few weeks ago or maybe a month or two ago, we looked at the album Rock and Roll by Louis Jordan, and Quincy Jones was the arranger of that album. What's going on here? Or not what's going on here, it sucks what's going on. Marvin Gaye, so a little bit of R&B in here as well. Theme from the Anderson tapes, Sean Connery movie that he did the soundtrack for. Brown Ballad, an actual original by Ray Brown, the bass player. Hickey Burr, theme from the Bill Cosby Show. And this was from the first show Cosby had, a sitcom after he left I Spy. But before the new Bill Cosby Show started, where Quincy was musical director. And then we've got one written by Quincy Jones, The Blues Odyssey from Roots to Fruits. And it's the only one that is not tied in with a movie or with television. Now, to give you some idea of the class of people Quincy Jones was using on these albums, it's just a who's who of musicians. Woodwinds, I'm looking here, Hubert Laws on flute and tenor sax. Peter Crisley on tenor sax. The trumpets and flugelhorns, goodness, we got Ernie Royal, Eugene Young, Marvin Stamm, Joe Newman, Freddie Hubbard. I mean, everyone a star in their own right. Trombones, Wayne Andre, Garnet Brown, and Tony Studd on bass trombone. Guitar players, we got Toots Thielman, who was a perennial winner of the Downbeat Jazz Awards for Miscellaneous Instrument, and on here Toots is playing guitar and harmonica. Eric Gale, Jim Hall, Joe Beck, Freddie Robinson. Drums, we got Grady Tate. Let me see, Paul Humphreys. George Stevens. Keyboard, Bobby Scott. Bob James, who we talked about way back last summer, playing keyboard on here. Jackie Baird. Joe Sample. Jimmy Smith on organ. Dick Hyman on harpsichord. Smooth synthesizers. We've got Paul Beaver and Ed Kaloff. Bass, Ray Brown, playing upright string bass. Let me see, Carol Kane on Fender bass. Miscellaneous instruments, Milt Jackson makes an appearance. Harry Lukowski on violins. And we got some vocal backups. But I mean, his band is just a who's who of musicians. Some great solos here. Solos by Marvin Stamm, solos by Freddie Hubbard, Hubert Laws, Toots Thielman, Harry Lukowski on the violin we mentioned. It was an excellent album. A little bit of vocals. I mean, Quincy singing on here as well. So, I mean, there's something you don't see often. The other Quincy Jones album I have was before this. I mean, Quincy had played with a number of bands. He did some arranging, and at this point, it's the early 1960s. He was primarily known as an arranger-composer. He really hadn't gotten into the producing as much. This album, let me see who we've got here now. A lot of tracks, mainly with Quincy's arranging. Not a lot of originals on here. I think there's only one Quincy Jones original, and that's one called, I take my glasses off to see it here, the John Bash. But some familiar songs. We've got Watermelon Man, we've got Cast Your Fate to the Wind, which we just mentioned on Smackwater Jack, Gravy Waltz by Ray Brown, Walk on the Wild Side, and not the Lou Reed version, this is the Bernstein version. Stormy Weather, Johnson Wreck, Groove, Take 5 by Paul Desmond. We've got some Dave Brubeck in here, Bossa Nova USA. Some pretty good jazz tunes, and again, featuring Quincy as an arranger. And this was one of my discount bin finds again, so I don't know if it's around anywhere or not. It doesn't list a lot of the performers, basically just the information about the recording itself, but it gave you a different perspective on what he was doing. Now for me, the album I showed you earlier, Smackwater Jack, it was a great album. Great musicians, great songs. As Quincy went on, his music got a little more into the rap area, things like that, a little less of his soundtracks. I found this was probably for me one of my favorite Quincy Jones albums. Now I'm not sure if it's available online, on streaming networks. You might find it there. It's Smackwater Jack, Quincy Jones, looking about the early 1970s. Okay, that's it for today. Something to go back and take a look at. We'll be back Wednesday when we'll be looking at classic rock. Everybody take care. We'll see you then.